Justin, $365 million in the budget that will go toward the setup toward the referendum. This is not the money that we'll be spending to actually stage the referendum. This is a whole lot of money that will go into education, into various community groups so that they can better understand what's going on. That's a hell of a lot of money.
It's a lot of money, but these things are going to cost a lot of money. I think it was the same-sex plebiscite, same-sex marriage plebiscite was around about $500 million to have that as well. These things are going to cost money, and it's one of those things, it'll either get criticised or it'll get praised, depending on whether you agree with it or not. But every time you do something like this, it's going to cost a fortune. I mean, have a look at any government spending. Look at these 5 staff members. Everything costs a ruddy fortune, and this was always going to be the case. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have it.
No, it doesn't. But, I mean, we're going to constantly see more money, Liz, pushed into this, because if you're going to do it, you have to do it properly. And so when we actually get to the date, whenever that might be, that we go and vote on this referendum, that's going to cost a heap of money.
Absolutely. It turns out enshrining racial privilege in the Constitution is very expensive, Steve. Who knew? But this is basically a referendum that the Australian people themselves never asked for. So to be handed a bill this big, and like you've said, this isn't actually for the referendum to be carried out itself. This contains things like $10.5 million for the mental health of Indigenous Aussies during this time. Of course, the government are really strongly pushing this idea that this should be traumatic for them, something I disagree with greatly. But I think this is a real slap in the face to the taxpayer, A, when we're all doing our utmost just to make ends meet as it is, and B, when we know full well that we spend over $40 billion every year pouring it into less than 3% of the population to address the real systemic issues in those communities.
No wonder they need help with mental health when you make comments like that.
Gaslighting people into believing is going to make a difference when all that money didn't. Being told that they don't have a voice when we know full well there's 12 Indigenous members of Parliament in the federal contingent, which is actually quite an over-representation of less than 3% of the population if you crunch the numbers. And we're supposed to just be gaslit into believing the fact that this is going to change everything, despite the fact that we've been spending a lot of money on it already. And in doing so, we're not just throwing this money out willy-nilly. The government has always very closely liaised with uncountable Indigenous bodies in the spending of those funds. We are being gaslit, Steve. We're still waiting for any details as to how this voice is going to exact a fraction of the wonderful, magical changes the government keeps promising that it will, should it get up.
Justin, I know you support the referendum and that everyone's entitled to their view, but in that $365 million, as Liz mentioned, there is money to help on the mental health aspect of Indigenous people who might be triggered during this referendum debate. How does that go down with the parent of a child who's had mental health issues since COVID and can't get an appointment with a psychiatrist?
Well, look, I mean, I think that's a different issue, and well, it's not a different issue. I actually agree with you. I think there should be both.
It's a mental health issue.
Because I think the way that this government, the way that this current government knocked on the head those 10 extra visits while COVID is still going on, and while people still desperately need mental health. Yeah, I agree with you. It shouldn't be ditched, but we should also be having it for the Indigenous people who need it as well. I mean, who the hell are we, the three of us? Who are we to say that they shouldn't be getting extra help during this time? They should be getting as much of it as they possibly can.
It's more the assumption, Justin, that the government has put this in there to further drive home the point that, oh, this is going to be needed because Australia's so racist and they're going to cop a lot of horror. That is simply not true.
Absolute twaddle.
It has already been said dozens of times as a justification for a whopping $10.5 million on mental health alone. It is absolutely unjustifiable.
So are you trying to tell me that the Indigenous people of Australia don't deserve $10 million spent on their mental health?
No,
Is that what you're really trying to tell me?
No.
I think
No,
that's
Liz is
what I
not
just
saying that, and neither am I. What I'm saying is we have a mental health issue in this country that is not being looked at for everybody, and yet we put in the budget this amount of money to help one group. This is the whole division thing that Liz is talking about. Got to wrap it up, guys. Liz Storer, thank you very much. Justin Smith,
Thank
you very much.